I suspect anybody who's ever come across it has always loved it. Is it one that you, like myself and maybe a lot of people, came across in competitive piping days, or had you come across it since then?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I first would have learned that tune in the pipe band that I grew up in, and we played it as part of a competition set. Yeah, in a much more competition style, dot cut. And then I brought the tune. I can't remember exactly how the tune came up as a possibility for Rise and Go, but I had brought the tune to the group, and then we sort of bounced back and forth about how we were going to play it. Was it going to be played in a rounder style or that more dot cut style? And we finally settled on the rounder style on the album. And I don't know, there was something about it smoothing it out in that round kind of way. It felt kind of magical to us.
Yeah. Oh, it
but,
is. Yeah.
Yeah. But it did definitely. I mean, that my first encounters with it would have been in a pipe band. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not like I ever stopped loving the tune, but that rounder style, I hadn't heard it played that way before. It definitely reinvigorated the tune for me, and I've
that's great.
got out my small pipes and played with it a little bit. So I appreciate you kind of dusting it off for me in that way. Personally, I really like the way you did it.
Thank you. That's fantastic. It's funny. Sort of old habits die hard, of course. So when I brought it to the band, I almost felt like I was committing some kind of treasonous act to sort of round it out like that. And I really did. It took me a while to sort of accept that this is okay. I'm allowed to do this. And I'm glad that we did end up going that route. Although it's funny, I still work with the pipe band that I grew up in. I still play with it. And it's a grade 4 group right now, and they're playing 2 parts of it as part of an MSR. And one of my students who was learning it at the time, I said, whatever you do, don't listen to the version on Meeting Place, because that's not how you're going to play it, right? It'll screw you up. Or at least don't listen to it until you've learned it the other way first.
Till after competition day, right?
Right.
Yeah. Now, do you think, is that part of, like, I've heard some whistle players and some uilleann pipers before refer to themselves as recovering Great Highland bagpipers? Is that part of it? Like that sense that, like, oh, if you're not playing, the correct embellishments, or if you're not, keeping the dot cut, whatever it is, that you're somehow being bad. Is that part of the recovery?
I know what you're saying. Yeah, I not maybe, but not really for me. Because for me, strangely enough, like, piping has sort of branched off into all these different avenues. But as it's gone into all these different avenues, like, where I started with Highland pipes has still kept going. So it's not like I sort of learned to play the Highland pipes and then sort of put that down and left it completely. Right. So I'm still playing Highland pipes, maybe not as much as I once was, but still playing regularly. And but bellows piping and uilleann piping and whistle playing has all sort of blossomed off of that. But they've all kept going sort of in tandem. So one of the things that I actually really think about a lot, maybe too much because I drive myself a little crazy with it, is how to sort of treat each one of those as their own unique instrument. I have students for all of those instruments, and I talk to them a lot about this. Especially the small pipe students that I have who are just interested in small pipes. They're not trying to become competitive Highland pipers. It's perfectly fine to be a Highland piper who gets a set of small pipes and then plays their small pipes exactly the same way that they play their Highland pipes. Same embellishments, same ornamentation, same repertoire, maybe even. That's fine. But for me, I kind of feel like they're different instruments, and I want to treat them as such. And so, more and more and more, I feel not only happy to sort of break the rules and not play the right embellishments, but I feel like I'm actually sort of, for myself anyway, playing them more correctly or more the way that I want them to sound. Again, not that there's any right or wrong way to go about it, but sort of finding my own style for those bellows pipes. So there definitely was a time where I felt like, oh, if I take a Highland pipe tune and put it on the small pipes, oh, do I have so much liberty? But man, I don't feel that way anymore. You've
broken the shackles.
Exactly. There was a couple of years ago, Brigitte Campbell was at the Pipers Gathering in Connecticut, and I took a trip. She and Blackie O'Connell, the great uilleann piper, were there, and I had never actually been to the event before, but I took a trip down so that I could meet both of them, because I really admire both of their playing.
Yeah.
And so I got a chance to sit down and talk with both of them about their approaches to things. And my conversation with Brigida was really interesting. Because she very much plays the small pipes in her own style too, right? She
absolutely.
It's her own thing. It's not and so we talked about that and sort of how small pipes are their own instrument and can be treated as such, and it validated some of the things that I had already been feeling and doing, but wasn't sure if it was how it was viewed by other people. And then after that conversation, I thought, I don't really care. It's, I'm playing them the way that I like to play them, and I think it's legitimate. So yeah. So they've really, all those pipes are still going in my head and in my repertoire and that, but I kind of treat them all as separate entities to some degree, with some overlap, of course, but they all have their own uniqueness to them. So yep.
No, I love hearing that, because it was her album The Reeling that made that click in my head as well. Like, but until then, my small pipes had been mini Highland pipes.
Mm-hmm.
And after hearing that, it was like, this is its own thing. This is totally its own thing.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I took a kind of circuitous route myself, because I played Highland pipes for years and grew up in a pipe band and that, and then really kind of got into whistle playing and uilleann pipes before I got serious about playing small pipes.
Oh, so rather than sort of like the gradual progression, you kind of jumped to the other end and then came back to the middle in a way.
Yeah, I was hopping around a little bit, and so because I had a background in uilleann pipes and whistle playing, I think that also helped me sort of, by the time I got sort of serious about small pipes, sort of helped me incorporate some of those other styles into it. It made it easier for me to sort of get away from just a strict Highland pipe style of playing the small pipes.
For so many of us who pick up small pipes, our only point of reference is great Highland bagpipes.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Well, maybe would you be willing to dig into that just a little bit more, Michael? I want to know maybe just a little bit of a sort of biopic. Like, you grew up in a pipe band. That's the Mohawk Valley pipe band, right?
Yeah, the Mohawk Valley Frasers. Yep.
You want to know something? I in the early times of scrolling your YouTube channel, I started to realize that I could almost date your videos in chronological order based on the apparent age of your Mohawk Valley pipe t-shirt. Do you remember the one I'm talking about? It's black with white lettering on it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's too funny.
But I want to know about, like, kind of where you grew up, how you encountered bagpipes, what got you into that pipe band. Kind of maybe give me some chronology that could maybe walk me up to, kind of up toward this album, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. So I started playing pipes, it's been like 25 years now or so. I grew up in Utica, New York, which is it's central New York. It's about an hour east of Syracuse. Syracuse is a reference point most people know in New York, or have a chance of knowing anyway.
It's not like my friend Andy from the Las Vegas pipe band would be very annoyed if I, Utica, that's like what, 3 blocks east of Times Square?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's many hours from New York City, right?
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, it's kind of smack in the middle of the state, and it's a city, but it's a small city. Great city. I love it. It's still home for me in many ways, even though I don't live there right now. And when I was a kid, I had very little musical interest at all, like in anything.
That surprises me.
I know, and me too. I think it was kind of there, lingering in the background. I kind of like to sing to myself and that, but I never really had much musical experience when I was a kid. I went to, my school didn't really have much of a music program, and so I just wasn't exposed to a lot of opportunities to get involved in music. So I didn't at least have a conscious interest in music. And then when I was like 10. A family friend, it was actually a friend of my sister's more closely, but she was living in Ireland at the time. He passed away, and so since she was in Ireland living, my parents went to his funeral and took me along because I was 10 years old. And as we were walking up to the church, kind of around the side of this big stone church, I could hear pipes for the first time. And he was a piper himself. His name was Frank Dugan. And I knew he was a piper, and I'd even seen him play the pipes before, but nothing had really clicked for me. And then for whatever reason, as we were walking up to the church that day, as we got closer and closer and closer, I heard this sound, and it just like grabbed me by the throat, or by the heart, I guess. And I was like, that was it from that moment forward. So we got to the front of the church, and there were 4 pipers standing at the door. So Frank, the man who had passed away, he was one of the founding members of the Mohawk Valley Frasers. And standing at the door were 4 other pipers who I would eventually come to play with in the Frasers, and 2 on either side of the door. And just walking through them to get into the church, I was just, totally awestruck. And it literally, it was like getting bit by a bug, and it just never ever went away.
Well, what a setting for it! I mean, in Ireland, that big stone church, like
yeah. Well, this was actually my sister was living in Ireland. This was in New York.
I see.
This
okay.
happened. Yeah, we sort of went
I'm going to stick
in
with
her
my
in her
romanticized
stead.
vision.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I like it. This is how legends are born.
Yeah, that's right.
So she was living in Ireland, and we kind of went because we were still back home in New York. But so anyway, the 4 guys at the church that day, Jim Clough, Ed Nickerson, Gil Mason, and Carl Sturdivant, were all guys that I would later go on to play with. And Carl Sturdivant ended up being the man who taught me how to play. I spent a little bit of time saying to my parents afterwards, I really want to do this. And it was, I had shown no musical interest at all ever before. So it was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's nice, honey. And it never was taken too terribly seriously. But after, this went on for a long time, I'm talking like at least a year or more, that I was saying, no, I really want to do this. Yeah. My sister ended up moving home from Ireland. And again, she was kind of friends with the folks who were in this scene, so she got me in touch with Carl, the guy who ended up teaching me to play. And kind of really beautifully, the wife of the man who had passed away, Frank Dugan, his wife Pat Dugan, she loaned me his practice chanter, Frank's practice chanter, so that I could learn to start playing. And with the caveat, she said if any of her grandchildren ever wanted to learn, I'd have to give it back. But I'm looking at. Exactly. But she very graciously gave it to me, and I'm looking at that practice chanter right now.
Oh, really?
It's sitting on the table here. It's what I've played forever.
Well, you still never do know. One of her grandkids
that's
might
right.
decide to pick it up.
I might get a phone call someday.
Yeah.
So anyway, they got me in touch with Carl. Carl started teaching me lessons. He was just a wonderful, wonderful, generous guy. Taught me really, really well. And then got me involved with the Frasers, with the band. So at that point, I joined the band probably about the age of 12. 12 is when I started really taking lessons.
Yeah.
And joined the band later that year. And then the band was under the direction of Jim Clough, still is. He was one of the guys that I heard that first day. And Jim has really become a mentor over the past all of the years that I've played in the band. He's a wonderful teacher and piper and great leader, and I've learned a lot from him. He's been one of my probably my biggest influence in terms of my Highland piping, and that's obviously spread out into a lot of my other piping. So
sure, yeah.
So
it sounds like you've managed to like for a lot of, and I don't hold anything against, like for me it's like, man, however you get it, and that's good, but for a lot of us, we end up falling into maybe not the very best instruction in the world when we get started, but it sounds like you managed to fall into a high quality crowd.
Yeah, I've thought about this many times over the years, how lucky I was to sort of be in that place at that time, because you're absolutely right. At that time, Jim Clough was running the Frasers, but he was also one of the founding members of the Oran Moore Pipe Band, which at that time, he and Donald Lindsay ran that together, and it was at the top of grade 2 in the Northeast. Jim was going and teaching at all the big summer schools alongside, the big names, Alistair Gillis and Angus McCall and all those guys. And, he was already a good teacher and was bringing all of that information from summer schools and seeing the pros and bringing that back. And so between him and my first teacher, Carl, it really was, for, a small little upstate New York pipe band, it was a really wonderful environment to start piping in. I got to be around a lot of other good pipers. I got to hear a lot of good piping, and it really I couldn't read a lick of music when I first started to play.
So this was your intro to everything musically.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my introduction to everything, and I was just kind of an audio sponge. Since I couldn't read music, it was just I was watching everyone and listening to everyone and just soaking it all up. And there was an incredible number of good pipers around me at that time, and also a handful of other people my age coming up into the pipe band at that time,
that's
which was
a big deal.
Which was really wonderful too. Many of them moved away or stopped playing, before I did, but still those first kind of formative years, there was a number of people my own age, and that was really great too.
Yeah, I got to learn in a high school program, so I had a lot of friends and peers, and like our local pipe band that I help run now is like, we do have some kids and teenagers in the group, but I and other adults are always kind of just stressed about finding more so that they'll have friends, so that they'll stay, because if it's just them and a bunch of old people, we're not cool. Darn it. We can't keep them around.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's true. It's hard. Our band has gone, the Frasers have gone through lots of iterations over the years. New people, older people, but it's always been a really nice mix. We've been really lucky too. A lot of families have gotten involved, where a child wants to learn, and then a parent says, okay, well, I'll do this too. I can think of one family in our band right now where the son is a great piper, so dad became one of the bass drummers, mom's one of the snare drummers, so it became
Beautiful.
kind of a family affair, which is really nice too.
Yeah.
But it's a really great organization that there are very few organizations out there like the Frasers, and I've been incredibly lucky to be a part of them for as long as I have. So.
Well, and it's significant too, not to push you ahead too much in the story, but I know from reading your bio that you've got multiple degrees in music, performance, and instruction, and theory, etc. So this is where it starts,
Yeah, it really was. I mean, that was the only musical thing that I did for really, the beginning of my musical life. And then it wasn't until I was kind of into high school that it was the organist at my church, who is now one of my dearest friends. His name's Randy Davis. I don't know what he recognized in me or saw in me, but he saw something and said, I think you could sing. And I said, what are you talking about? But anyway, he was the one who started to teach me music theory. My high school didn't have much of a music program, so he started to privately teach me music theory, sort of some basic voice lessons, and then hooked me up with a really wonderful voice teacher, a woman by the name of Anita Furman, who really kind of launched me off as a singer. And then that's when, after a couple of years of that, decided, okay, I'm going to go to music school. So I did my undergraduate. I went just as music education to start, but then I added a performance degree while I was there. So I did a double major. Then left, once I was done with undergraduate, got a teaching job, taught elementary school, taught everything from kindergarten to 6th grade, general music and chorus and band, and did all of that. And then I went back to school, for my master's degree. I did a master's in vocal performance. So this was all, more classical stuff. Really the singing was more geared towards, operatic stuff.
Oh, I've been trying to find videos of you singing opera so that I could put the audio in here. I haven't been able to find any yet.
No, they are probably non-existent. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, that was a huge part of my life, and it really interesting in those years. Like, my piping life and my singing life were really kind of two completely separate things, and weirdly so. Like, I almost felt like they couldn't intermingle. I did my master's degree, and then by the time I finished my master's degree, I for various reasons kind of decided I wasn't sure how much I was gonna keep singing. But I still do, and I still teach singing and that, but it's not quite as active a part of my life. But all of that sort of built in this background in classical music and classical training, and then I started to see, like, I actually could apply that to my piping life. So I'd say some of the beginnings of that. This friend of mine, Randy, he as a church musician, for various events we'd have instrumentalists in that, and we're fortunate to have a really good music program at this church in Utica. So he provided me with opportunities to, write stuff for pipes and orchestra. So I forget what year it was, but the first time I did this, actually this one wasn't at the church, it was with a local choral group. I wrote sort of a suite for pipes and orchestra, arranging some tunes. And it was great. That opened up a whole new door to me in terms of like what I could do with the two sides of my background.
Yeah.
And so that's great. I've done a handful of stuff for pipes and orchestra. Some writing just for orchestra. Nothing, mind-blowing or terribly complicated, but nice, like stuff that highlights the pipes in another setting. And that's kind of been a bit of a mission of mine, on and off over the years, is to sort of like promote the pipes as as musical instruments, as something that can be in a lot of different settings, not just something you see once a year, in a parade or at a funeral or something like that. So, really kind of trying to promote them as the musical instrument that they are.
Yeah, I've got a book here on my shelf. I'm trying to remember. Man, Michael, I think, might be his first name as well. Dr. Welch. He does.
Oh yeah, Matt. I think Matt. I think
that's
it is.
Matt
Yes.
Welch. Yeah. That sounds right. I can only see his last name on the spine of the book.
Yeah.
But he's I've been excited by listening to him talk about similar things, about having having worked with people like Philip Glass and stuff like that. And trying to like kind of get bagpipes into sort of other scenes other than just parades.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's interesting to me, Michael, though, that you, I feel like maybe this is an incorrect perception that I have. So maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but I feel like if you come across a person who has advanced degrees in music and also plays the bagpipes, it's probably the music theory, the piano, the organ, the orchestra classes, etc., that come first, and then they pick up bagpipes as a curiosity at some point along their journey. Rather than it being bagpipes as sort of like a foundation or starting point. So maybe I'm wrong about that impression, but I feel like this isn't, like in a similar way that it's interesting that you took the route of going from Highland pipes over to whistle and uilleann pipes and then back to small pipes. It feels like you've taken a path less traveled in this musical journey of yours.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. I do know people who have gone the same route that I did, had pipes first and then got more involved in music. But I know people who have done the opposite too. I think for myself, I'm thankful that I went the route that I did. Pipes being as much as pipes are a musical instrument, and we want to promote them as being a musical instrument right up there with any other instrument, they do have their oddities and their quirks too.
For sure, yeah.
And so I think, I don't know, I got involved in piping sort of with no preconceived notions. I just took it for what it was and was taught and accepted that. Whereas I think for myself, if I had sort of come into it with a classical musician's eye and then tried to pick it up, you bring with that all these other I don't know, perceptions of what music is or how things are supposed to go. So even just styles, like the style of music we play on the pipes can be so different from a lot of
downright
classical music.
Confusing sometimes.
Right, exactly. Or at least I think a lot of classically trained musicians might look at pipe music, a march or a jig or something on the page and say, oh, it looks simple, and in many ways, many tunes are sort of have a simpleness about them, but getting the style correct.
Yeah, where's that swing coming from? That's not on the paper.
Exactly right. Yeah, playing it so that it actually sounds like it ought to be played is another thing too that you can't just get off of the page. And I think sometimes musicians who come to pipes, not always, but it can sometimes be a barrier, or there can be an extra hurdle that you need to get over if you're sort of a classically trained musician coming to pipes after that, because just the style is just so different, or even learning the style of the embellishments. I've known a lot of folks who have learned pipes either as often as adults, and they played another instrument back in the day, in school, in a band or something like that. And, even something as simple as the idea of grace notes, when a flute player sees grace notes, they come well before the beat,
Yeah.
Whereas in piping, not so much. They're sort of defining our beat for us. So it's a different style. So I'm kind of thankful that I learned pipes first and sort of had that style, in my gut from the get-go.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about how, like, because just so many more people doing work in sort of like the rest of music. I guess if you were going to have to come to something where bagpipes maybe require more of a feel it out kind of approach, and there's a lot of educational materials available for bagpipes, of course, but there's even more of a wealth of education available for classical styles of Western music.
Sure.
And so I guess maybe this I can see what you mean. To have bagpipes kind of in your gut, kind of in a natural way, maybe makes the sort of somewhat cerebral approach to learning other stuff. Maybe that's more.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much of piping that, like, you can't, there's more resources out there than ever before, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But I have as an example, a student that I started with recently. Before he started taking lessons, he started, kind of looking stuff up online and seeing, like, can I go this alone? And after just a couple of lessons, he was like, oh, when he heard somebody, it was, I forget what embellishment, but he was learning some embellishment, like a D throw or something like that. And, the fact that I can read this, how to do this on the page, and I understand it somewhat, but then to hear how it's actually supposed to go really changes, how it works. So there's just an element of, you kind of have to live it and experience it in piping. And that's why too, I was kind of, in some ways, thankful that I couldn't even read music when I started to play the pipes. I just had to soak it all in. I listened to every recording I could get my hands on. I watched the other pipers around me, and it just really seeped into my being.
That's interesting too. There's kind of this, we kind of hold on to this idea of the tradition of bagpipes. What is it? Cantrock, the style of learning pre-written music,
Right,
and,
right.
You kind of got to experience the sort of progression of music learning that we still remember within piping within your own life. You got to learn by ear first.
Yeah. I mean, I really, in many ways, I was very, very thankful for that. There definitely did become a point where there was somewhat of a hindrance, where I wished I could have read music.
Sure.
It would have helped with certain things. I would have avoided some mistakes too. There were certain things that I was just trying to figure out, how did they do that, by ear, and I did it wrong, and then had to correct myself. But in general, I'm very thankful. I mean, obviously I went on to music school. I learned to read music in that, but still today, I'm much happier to learn a tune, unless it's something I have to play in a competitive setting where I've got to, play it a certain way. If it's just a tune I'm learning, or if it's a tune I'm going to play with, with a rise and go or something like that, I'd much rather hear it and learn it by ear than see the notes on the page.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. It makes sense. And speaking of which, let's stick some more music in here.
Sure.
I want to play a little bit of maybe a good chunk of track 3, which is Waltzes and Reels. Is that what you called it? No, you call it Waltzes and Reels. That's right.
Okay.
This is the Jewels of the Ocean, the humors of Tulla, and Last Summer's Reel. And the reason I want to play a good chunk of this is because this one strikes me as being an especially great set. Like, the tunes, I feel like, really complement and accent each other by striking this balance between similarity and difference. You can tell when it goes from one tune to the next, but they also belong together. have you organized competition sets for your pipe band? Did you organize this set? Kind of maybe what's been your you did tell me a little bit about organizing stuff with orchestra. Is that I don't know. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I love doing that. Yes, I've done it for both. In the pipe band for the last 10 years or so, I've been running one of the competition sections. So, sort of a lot of the musical arrangements sort of fall to me. But at the same time, in the pipe band setting, I rarely ever do them totally alone. I'll usually kind of sketch things out and say, these are the tunes that I think will work. Sometimes I've got an idea how they're going to go together, right off the get-go. Sometimes I say, I know these are going to go together, but something needs to be, massaged a little bit to make them work together. So I've been really thankful to have ears and minds that I trust in the band to bounce ideas off of. And almost always in the Frasers, it's been a bit of a group effort. Jim Clough, who I mentioned, and another friend of mine, Jason Madison, who played in the band for a number of years. I'll almost always say, hey, here's what I'm thinking of for the new music. Here's how I think it'll go together. What are your thoughts? And I really value it because sometimes I'll think something's a real winner, and they'll just kind of say, no, you're gonna have to rethink that, or they'll think of a possible problem or a better tune that I hadn't thought of before, or a different way to do it. So I really love putting together new music, and like I say, I probably do the bulk of it, but I really like to get the feedback from other people. And I think the best stuff that I've ever put together in the pipe band has been a result of it sort of going through the review process with other people. And it's very much the same in Arise and Go too. There are a handful of sets that either my bandmates, the fiddler is my wife, Ellie, and our friend Tim is the guitar player. And there have been occasions where either she or Tim or I have said, I've got this idea for a set, here are the tunes. And, it's basically just been, we've run with it, and it's been unchanged from there. That has happened.
Perfect out the gate.
Yeah, I mean, that has happened before. With little tweaks and things, but for the most part, it's kind of ready to go from the beginning. But I think it's kind of the same thing where our best sets have been where one of us brings sort of the core concept. And it's interesting. In Arise and Go, we sort of, I love the collaborative process with the two of them because we're all very different, both personality-wise and musical background-wise, and in a lot of different ways. And so we really, there's a lot of checks and balances in the group. So we really bring different perspectives and ideas. And so sometimes, like I say, it's somebody's come with a core idea and maybe there's some tweaks or one tune gets changed or something. Sometimes you couldn't do this in every group, I suppose, but with us, it really works well. Sometimes we just start with an idea for sort of a vibe or a feeling or, if it depends. Like, are we thinking of planning something for a performance or are we thinking of planning something for an album or both? It could be we need something a little slower. We need something a little bit more emotive or introspective. We need something that's, gets people up on their feet, And sometimes it starts as vaguely as that, with just the feeling that we need to go for, and then we work together to build off of that. But I would say most of the time, one of us brings a core idea, or even a single tune as a starting point, and then we build from there. But it's a really interesting process, and I love that process.
So that makes me think of track 6. I think it's called on the album Slides and Polkas.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Because, and maybe this is an exception to the rule, but maybe this is an example of it. There's a transition in this set. Happens about 1:45. I think that it's going from is it Cuz Teehans?
Cuz Teehans, yeah.
from Cuz Teehans number 2 into Merton O'Connor's.
Yeah.
I think that's where the transition is happening. I could be getting the exact tunes wrong. Maybe it's the transition.
No, I think you're right.
You're right. After. This transition, I could listen to this all day. This is I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable with praise, but this is maybe this is definitely my favorite transition between tunes I've ever heard.
Wow.
It's so cool because it changes. It doesn't just change from tunes. It also changes, like, is it tempo or is it meter? I'm not exactly sure what's happening there, but there's something changing also that it's just so cool.
Yeah, it changes meter there because the slides are all in 12/8, and then the polkas that come after are in 2/4. But there's still like a consistent there's a consistent beat there, but the meter changes over there. That was one of those moments I remember once when we were working that up and rehearsing it, where we thought that was great. We just thought that was so cool. Yeah. But we're like, we're the only ones who are ever gonna even notice that happened. Well, so that's nice to know that it caught your ear. So thank you.
It sure did, man. I absolutely love that, and that's what made me wonder, like, just having enjoyed it and then thinking about talking to you. I just thought, like, man, how does a person or a group come up with something like that? Like, is it purely organic that you were like, well, we want to go from this tune to this tune, so let's just do that and it happens? Or is this like a careful and precise procedure where you sit down with the score of music in front of you and you go, okay, when we transition, from to the new meter, we've got to make sure we place what was previous. The 1 in the 4 needs to go on the 1 in the 3 or something. Like how scientific versus feeling it is the process.
Right. It's somewhere probably in between those two because well, I will say both Ellie and Tim also have really strong backgrounds in classical music. Ellie, when she was growing up, she played classical violin and piano, and also made her living for many years as a trombone teacher.
Teacher, really?
Yeah, she's done it all. And now, mind you, she's a botanist now, so she didn't, that's her main job now. But yeah, she's done it all. And Tim also did a lot of classical violin. He went to Ithaca College, where I happened to actually do my master's, so we didn't overlap. But anyway, we all have kind of this background in more formalized music, but also we're playing traditional music sort of from a very early age too. Yeah. So it allows us, I think, to sort of have a certain vocabulary when we need to get into the nitty-gritty, but we never have we almost never ever have music in front of us. I mean, if we're stuck for a tune idea and we pull tune books off the shelf and look for some ideas, then maybe we'd have music in front of us, but that rarely happens. And certainly when we're arranging things, it's all through talking through it. It's not we're never writing anything down. Nothing on the albums, any of our concerts or our albums or anything. There's no scores for any of that. None of it's written out. But it's just sort of, it's talking through it. And we have, like I say, enough of a sort of vocabulary in formalized music that we can sort of just talk through it that way and work it out. So, sometimes it happens like really organically, and then sometimes it does need to be talked through a little bit more, but it's still quite organic in the sense that we're just sitting around and working it out together rather than writing it out on paper and figuring it all out that way.
I think that I honestly think that feeling comes through. I feel like if one of you were writing down the score and then bringing it to the others and saying, if you were coming to the others with the score and saying, all right, here's the harmony I want the fiddle to play, and here are the chords I want the guitar to play, here you go, play it the way I wrote it, it would sound like a pipe solo with accompaniment. But what it sounds like instead is a group of musicians who are, the cohesion is there. I think it comes through.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, it allows us to sort of like structure things so that, we kind of see each other as, 3 equal parts in the group sound. Yeah. Even a lot of like pipe and fiddle, the guitar could very easily sort of become the background accompaniment instrument, but we don't try to treat it that way. You know, we try to have all three players sort of be at the fore, because each one is sort of like, you know, we're all contributing sort of in equal parts. So yeah, I think you're right. The process that we go through to arrange stuff really allows for that, for each voice to kind of come through in their own way. Yeah.
Now, speaking of the other members of the group, just to review real quick, we've got you on pipes, we've got Ellie on fiddle, and we've got Tim on guitar and some other strings, but also his foot percussion. The foot percussion stuff. I want to look at the first track on the album, this Acadian Reel.
Yeah.
This one, man, I saw a video of you guys playing this one before I'd listened to the album, and it didn't take more than one listen to be hooked. Suggestion, but like this is the only pipe tune I've ever heard that I definitely thought like I could imagine this echoing from the open door of like a Zydeco club in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Is it? I'm not familiar with the tune. Otherwise, is this an original or did?
No, this is a tune from Prince Edward Island. It's interesting, you know, you say that though because of the French connection to Prince Edward Island.
Yeah.
There is a definite connection there with that style of music. So this is a tune by Edward Arsenault. The Arsenault name is throughout Prince Edward Island. I think multiple families with the same last name. But anyway, they're Edward Arsenault wrote this tune. There was another fiddler who I believe, if I'm no expert in this area, but I believe he was a separate fiddler named Eddie Arsenault. So there was Eddie and Edward.
Well, that's not
Eddie
confusing.
Eddie Arsenault
it's like
really...
Donald Lindsay's who play bagpipes, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Eddie Arsenault is kind of one of the legendary fiddle guys from up there. And there's a recording of him playing this tune by Edward Arsenault, the Acadian Reel. That really Ellie had it. It's like home recordings, it's even called like Acadian Kitchen Party or something like that. I don't know, but it's recordings made in people's homes, and this is one of the tracks on there where she learned it. Like when she was a kid, she learned it off of that, and then when we started playing together, she brought this tune to us. I think she brought it to me first and said, "What do you think of this? Would this work on the pipes?" Because that often is one of the first steps. If one of them is bringing a tune, they say, "How does this go on the pipes?" Yeah. So that there is somewhat of a filtering process there sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was like, "Oh, this is ideal. This is perfect." And then what really makes that tune so special, though, I mean, it's a great tune as it is, but it was Ellie's idea to, in a lot of Quebecois music and Acadian music, there are tunes that are irregular, like they have an uneven number of beats or measures.
Yeah.
And it gives them sort of this a really interesting and unique feel, where you're kind of caught off guard and keeps you, I don't know, on your toes, I guess. But anyway, this tune, as it originally was written, was not like that. It was just an even reel. But she had the idea to drop a beat at, I'd have to think about this, I think at the end of the first part. So it has this little bit of a hiccup in the middle that you don't normally hear if you find other recordings of the Acadian reel. And for me, that like just sealed the deal. It just made it that much more like awesome and interesting.
Yeah.
And that idea was all her. But
so I know that you'd mentioned that you're working on a tune book.
Yeah.
I'm not putting any pressure on you, of course, but I'm curious, is your rendition of Acadian Reel in the tune book?
I think it's going to be. Yeah, I think it's going to be. The tune book, if it ever gets finished, will have not like every tune Arise and Go's ever played in it, but certainly some of the more trad tunes that maybe are less common to be heard on the pipes.
Yeah.
So I do have a handful of them in there, and I do have a setting of the Acadian Reel to go in. It's it's one of those tunes. I have to look though. I have a couple of tunes I still have to fact check its date on. I think technically it might still be under copyright. So that's one. I mean, if if trad musicians say that their tunes are copyrighted, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'll look into the legalities of it before I go. But yeah, there'll be a handful of
hey,
of
if
tunes
it's
like
still
that.
under copyright, then volume 4 of Michael Roddy's tunes, down the road. Whenever
There you go.
Whenever it expires, then we'll get it then.
Yep, that's right. That's it. You got it.
or if you drop enough more beats out of it, then it becomes a new tune.
Yeah, totally different tune, right? Yeah, that's right. That's funny. Yeah.
Well, let me pull you over for just a minute to talk about equipment, if you would.
Sure.
I've got. Let's see here. I've got off your website. I've got this thing here. Michael plays Hamish and Finn Moore border pipes. Nate Banton small pipes. Help me pronounce this one. Is it Cillian or Cillian O'Brien?
Cillian O'Brien.
Cillian. Okay.
Yep.
They make your Uilleann pipes. So here's one thing that I've enjoyed. I enjoyed watching your. You had a series of videos called. Was it called the Tune Yard?
Oh yeah.
I felt like, were you putting those out during COVID, or was it just that I was watching them during COVID?
It came out during COVID.
I say during COVID. That's like for so long now, right? Like anything you've done in like the last decade, it's been during COVID. So.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had recorded a bunch of those. So we were living in Ithaca, New York. That's where we met Tim. Ithaca, New York is a really cool town, and we lived there. That's where I met Ellie, actually. We lived there for several years, and we moved to Canada during the pandemic. Ellie's Canadian. And those videos were in our backyard in Ithaca, and that was the last time Ellie and Tim and I played together in person. Before we moved.
I didn't know some of your other videos have been split screen with
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so we moved, and then the border between the U.S. and Canada was closed. So for a long time, we weren't able to see each other. So that was actually the last time we played together. And most of those videos, or at least some of them, were originally part of a virtual concert that we had done for the Maine. It's an organization called the Maine Celtic Celebration. We were supposed to, as part of a tour in 2020, we were supposed to play there up in Maine, and then it got canceled because of COVID. So we recorded a concert for them in our backyard.
Yeah.
And then we recorded some extra material as well, and it's a combination of those that we sort of turned into that series to release them one by one.
There was one of them. So I've been bouncing my youngest baby to sleep to those videos for a few months now, at least.
Oh, that's awesome.
Maybe longer. So I've watched them all many times. And there's one, I wish I could remember now which one it was, or if I'd taken a note which one it was, where you transition to border pipes, I think. I think you were coming off of small pipes. Probably
yeah.
not Uilleann pipes. And you scoot the chair back.
Yes.
And then you're about to sit down, you stop, and you look at the other two, and you scoot back even further.
Yes.
Which is delightful for any piper, knowing the volume difference, right, between small pipes and border pipes. But I'm curious, between all the pipes that you play, the sets specifically that you have, but also the styles that you play. If you had to pick, let's call it a desert island set of pipes, you could only have one set. What kind would they be? Who would be the maker? What would be the setup?
Wow, that is
unless this puts you in an awkward position. If you don't want some makers to think, hey, why didn't he pick my pipes? You can just tell me what kind if you prefer.
No, that's incredibly hard.
I like asking the hard questions.
Yeah, really. I didn't know this would be such a hard-hitting interview. It's really hard, especially because I'm so fortunate to play the instruments that I do play, and I really spent a lot of time trying to get the instruments that I play. So I have had very specific sounds in mind of what I liked and what I wanted for my pipes. And obviously, with as you can't just sort of call up the store and get the exact type of pipes that you want. You either exactly you're either on a waiting list for a long time, or you have to wait for secondhand instruments to come up for sale. So the instruments that I play regularly, my uilleann pipes, my border pipes and small pipes, they were sort of hard-fought battles to get them in some sense. I kind of worked for them. Nate Banton made my small pipes years ago. That was the only one of these instruments that was actually specifically made for me. The others were secondhand instruments that I picked up along the way, and sort of had other instruments and sold those instruments in order to buy the instrument I really wanted. So all three of them, all three of those sets are kind of near and dear to me. I feel like I'm betraying them a little bit to think about. I would say I absolutely adore my set of border pipes from Finn and Hamish. However, they wouldn't be the set that I would take to the desert island, only because border pipes are just so cantankerous. And I drive myself crazy, and it's nice to be able to get a break from the volume too. So I love them to death, and I love playing them. But it wouldn't be those. But it would be a really hard-fought battle between the small pipes and the uilleann pipes, because they're both so different in my mind. It's easier for me to sort of pick between small pipes, border pipes, and highland pipes. I could say, I'd take the small pipes to the desert island for sure, and it would be a Nate Banton set. But gosh, uilleann pipes and small pipes, the uilleann pipes are really near and dear to my heart too. I have this chanter that I play is by Cillian O'Brien, and I love the sound of his pipes. The rest of my set is by another maker, and so I think if I could wave my magic chanter wand, whatever, and just magically have a full set by Cillian O'Brien of uilleann pipes, I think that's what would go to the desert island with me for sure. That
would tip it ahead, huh?
Yeah, that would put it over the top, I think.
Now, similar question, a little bit different. Having played on these different sort of chanter systems, on which layout are your fingers most comfortable? Like, on which of these could you play most freely for the longest, or where can you improvise most freely?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. My initial reaction is it depends on the day.
Sure.
There are some days where I feel like I've never even picked up some of these instruments before. I think probably I'd feel most free and most in command on either the small pipes or the border pipes. Only because that's what I've, Scottish piping is what I've done the longest. So even if I'm playing in sort of a non-traditional style of Scottish piping, breaking the mold of Highland pipes in that, different embellishments or different styles in that, I think I would still probably feel the most at home on those instruments, and the most at home to sort of improvise and be a little more free. At the same time, I've been teaching a lot of uilleann pipes online throughout COVID, and it's forced me to really think about how I play and how I approach things. And as I break it down for students, I'm breaking it down for myself too. And so I have I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because there are times when I'll go after a long stretch of playing uilleann pipes or teaching uilleann pipes, and I haven't picked up the small pipes for days or even a couple weeks, where suddenly I'm like feel more at home on the uilleann pipes, and it's a newer instrument to me. I mean, we're still talking, I don't know, 10 or 15 years or something, but I haven't been with it as long as Scottish pipes, but there are times when it starts to feel, it's definitely gotten to be a much more comfortable instrument for me. But yeah.
Do you find that like playing whistles in different keys, for example, your uilleann pipes, I'm guessing you're probably set up with a D chanter? That's the more common of them. I guess the reason I asked this, when I was a kid, my parents put me in a piano program where they taught. The first time I learned music was with what's called fixed do solfege.
Yeah. Yep.
Which I gather is more common in Europe, but not as common here.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Basically, it just screwed me up, because from there, then I had to learn the letter name system when I was in middle school, and then in high school in music theory, I had to learn typical solfege. I didn't even know that do could move,
Yeah.
Where I'm, so my brain though now, decades hence, I still think in fixed do, so like
interesting.
If I'm thinking in D major, I'm thinking re with a fa sharp.
Wow. Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of screwed up, and so it does make me think, like when I'm playing like a low D whistle, I'm thinking in that through the lens of an A bagpipe chanter.
Interesting.
So are you at a point where when you pick up any one of these chanters, whatever key it's in, you're thinking in the sounding note, or are you going home to Great Highland bagpipes every time you pick up a chanter?
Yeah, okay. I think when I first started to play whistle and uilleann pipes more regularly, and suddenly, D uilleann pipe chanter, D whistle, I was sort of relating a lot to the Highland pipe chanter, but now they've really kind of separated out in my head completely. So yeah, I think probably for a time maybe I kept thinking back to things in terms of the Highland pipe scale and that, but not so much. Not so much for a long time. When I went to music school, I remember my freshman year, there was the class was called ear training or sight singing and ear training or something like that, and the teacher that I had for that, it was movable do. That's what we learned. There was not fixed do, and I didn't even learn that the fixed do existed, until a while later. And I thought, how could anybody do that? That blew my mind. So it's always seemed easier to me to sort of think in that movable do. But yeah, I think that's more how my head works.
So to some degree, my marveling at you and other multi-instrumentalists is just the limitations of my own upbringing.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. But I know for a long time, like when I learned, and I tell this to, I have a handful of students who are learning to play the uilleann pipes, but coming from Highland pipes, and There is like a kind of at least for me, there was a shift in thinking, like to get away from, I can only think in terms of the Highland piping scale. All my fingers are down. What note is that on the Highland pipe chanter versus all my fingers are down, and finally I was, they separated out, and I can think of them both completely independently now. But it took a little while to get used to that, for sure. Yep.
Now, I kind of skipped over a little bit. I wanted to ask you more about Tim's foot percussion.
Oh yeah, yep.
Track 4, I think, is a good has some good examples of that. Maybe I'll play some of track 4 here real quick.
Great.
I'll put it in post. That's the Dirty B.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
like I've seen something similar or heard something similar from sort of like Appalachian music before. Never in a seated position, usually a guy dancing around, but what can you tell me about this? To what degree is this Tim's invention, and to what degree is he playing out of a tradition?
Yeah, well, it's definitely rooted in tradition. Where he's drawing from, and how it relates probably most closely to the music we play in Arise and Go, is coming from like a Quebecois tradition. In Quebecois music, it's very common for usually a fiddler to sort of be accompanying themselves with foot percussion while they play the fiddle. And there's some great videos out there of, you can find fiddlers doing this, and it's just amazing to watch, this sort of self-accompaniment with the foot style. So Tim had learned this. Tim is also a brilliant fiddler. Plays, Tim is one of those incredible people who, he'd say he's an Irish fiddler. He had studied classical music, but he plays Irish music. But he plays every style and plays it really, really well. He does a lot of New England fiddle music, contradance music, Irish music, but can just as easily bounce into other styles as well. He's
like one of these guys who he's a whole iceberg. And it's like, well, which chunk of me does Arise and Go need? Here you go.
Yeah.
I'll give you just exactly what you need,
Yep, exactly. He's a really wonderful he's a wonderful musician in general. He's a wonderful musician to collaborate with in that sense too. He really is. Ellie and I have both said when Ellie and I started to play together, we thought we wanted somebody to play with, and we thought, well, how about Tim? We knew Tim from playing in sessions around Ithaca. We didn't know him super well. Ellie knew him a little better than I did, actually. But we thought, Tim won't want to play with us. Tim's too good. He doesn't want to play with us. Yeah. And then we asked him.
He wouldn't descend to our level.
I know, right? But he agreed, and he makes us better because he's such a good musician. But anyway, the foot percussion side of it comes out of this fiddle tradition. Normally it would be the fiddler in Quebecois music, but he knew how to do it, and that addition in as the guitar player just works equally as well. So that's really where it's coming from for him.
I love the sound. I mean, any part of the music makes you want to dance, and any kind of percussion is percussion, but maybe there's something about it being actually with feet that just like really drives the desire to dance. It's really fun to listen to. Fun to watch
absolutely.
Too. I would I'll have links in the show notes to YouTube videos and stuff. I'd highly recommend anybody taking a look at your YouTube channel because it's a lot of fun to watch too.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. It is. It's a really unique element to add in, and it really fills out the sound. We never wanted, we play festivals and, some larger stages in that, but we never wanted to be a band who's, got a big drum set backing us up or something like that. It's just not the style that we're going for. And that, when we added the foot percussion in, it was like, oh, this is that little extra, no pun intended, kick that we need.
Take the pun.
To sort
I love puns.
To sort of fill out that sound a little bit, so it's been a great addition to the band sound. Absolutely. I have this wonderful picture we recorded the Meeting Place album in Dimension Sound Studio in Boston, in Jamaica Plains, I think it is. And Keith Murphy, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is a wonderful musician, a wonderful singer, wonderful guitar player, great all-around folk musician, backs up some of the best in the business, but also is one of the best in the business himself. And he was the producer for our album, and he was a wonderful, wonderful help to us. And Keith also knows how to and does foot percussion in his own music. And so when one of the tracks we were recording, normally Tim plays and does the foot percussion at the same time. But, for the album, you can isolate things, and it just makes everybody's life a little bit easier. So rather than make him worry about doing the guitar and the foot percussion at the same time, there was, I think, one of the tracks, I can't remember what, we recorded all the music, and then he added the foot percussion after so that he could just focus on being really steady and really, So I have this great photo of looking out into the recording studio. I was up in the booth, and it's just Tim for like 5 minutes in the recording area with his eyes closed and his feet going. And our producer, Keith, who is also this incredible foot percussionist, sitting there, kind of in the thinker's pose with his eyes closed, listening to him through headphones. And it was just 5 minutes of this zen, clap, clippy, clap, clippy, clap, clippy, clap, clippy, clap. And, just both of them listening so intensely to this. But it was really kind of neat.
Almost like the feet are a third party there, and the two of them are just considering what the feet are doing, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I just Googled Keith Murphy. I heard his Bound for Canaan album.
Oh yeah, great album. Yeah. He's a wonderful, wonderful musician. Yep.
Oh, that's really cool. You got to work with him. That must be awesome.
Yeah.
Now you brought up a thing here that I was curious about when you said that you and Ellie were thinking about who to bring in, and I feel like maybe Ellie to some degree is trapped anyway, right? Because you're married, and so she has to play with a piper, Like,
I guess, yeah.
Maybe that's not fair though, right? Like, basically, I brought this up to my own wife before, like as I was listening to your music, I was like, man, because she'd said to me something like, wouldn't you have so much fun playing with a group like this? Now, Michael, I would never be able to play the way that you play. But she's like, wouldn't this be so much fun? I'm like, yeah, sure it would, but I don't know how a bagpiper convinces other musicians to play with them.
Right.
How does that happen? I mean, that's not just a rhetorical question. How'd you do it, man?
That's funny. Well, I guess Ellie and I were just destined to be, because from the get-go when I met her, she said she wanted to marry a bagpiper. She loved bagpipes, and I don't know.
You found her. The legend said there was one out there. You found her.
I know. Sorry, everybody else. I got the only one. I guess Ellie grew up in the Canadian Maritimes, and it must be that influence or something. But she loves the pipes, and she, for whatever reason, she saw that as a pretty strong attribute for me. So
yeah, good for you, huh?
So I got really lucky in that regard.
Awesome.
I still remember sort of early on in our dating days, we were together and we were cooking dinner, and she said, let's put some music on, and I don't know what I pulled up, but it was bagpipes, it was just straight up bagpipes, and it was early on enough that she knew I was really into this, but I remember her turning and looking to me and just saying, "Oh, you're really into this." And I was like, yeah, I am. So I mean, little by little, she and I started to play together. But for both of us, it was really a learning curve. I mean, she'd never really played with a piper before. So she had to get used to playing with me. I played in a very different style from her. So we really had to learn how to play together. And for a long time, sort of musically butted heads, just because we were kind of coming from such different backgrounds. And it took me a long time to sort of as I was sort of breaking out of some of the rigidity of my pipe band playing, she helped me do a lot of that. Whereas I was, prone to play things really kind of metronomically straight and round. She was often playing with a lot more swing and just, a very different accent than I was used to playing with. And so I had a lot to learn. And she really helped a lot with that. And, she has definitely had to adjust to learn to play with pipes as well. So there's been big learning curves on both of our parts there. And then, as far as getting somebody else to play with us, we like I said, we knew Tim from sessions. So, I think, I don't know, I'd have to ask him if this is true, but I think, we kind of maybe started to win Tim over with the idea of more uilleann pipes and Irish music first, because he'd seen me play. Right, yeah, exactly. He'd seen us play at the session. We'd played together before, so that was a somewhat logical thing for us to do, to play together. I know for Tim though, playing with Scottish pipes was a much less familiar thing. So kind of had to introduce him to that, but the Scottish side of things connected to enough of the music that Ellie did, or parts of the music that Ellie did, that we could sort of present a united musical idea and that he could get on board with. But like I say, all three of us come from really different musical backgrounds, some overlap, but definitely different focuses. So we learn from each other all the time, and bring very different things to the table. But and as far as convincing them, to play with the piper, a lot of that is trying. I try to think about fitting myself into these other styles that we're all bringing to the table. I don't. It's sort of like, you go to another country and you at least try to show enough respect to have some basic phrases to, like, to be able to say thank you in their language, to, have some basic conversation down, not just sort of go in, doing things your own way. I sort of feel like that to some degree with the music too. It's sort of like, okay, Scottish and Irish pipes definitely have sort of their way of doing things that's comfortable, but like you can learn to sort of fit into these music from other traditions in a way that's a little bit more respectful of those traditions, rather than, it doesn't really, I'm not trying to knock it if anybody does this, but it doesn't really appeal to me to like hear a tune from another culture or tradition or that played, with Scottish ornaments on a tune.
Sure,
like
yeah.
I think it's really cool to fit it onto your Scottish instrument. I think that's fantastic. But I think I don't know, I just try to like see if there's a way for me to sort of adapt it to that tradition so that it sounds a little more natural, I guess. Is what I'm trying to say.
No, that totally makes sense. And I love the analogy of like I'm just imagining like the Great Highland bagpipes being like the musical equivalent of the obnoxious American abroad. Just
yeah,
like,
right.
This is how I do things, and you must comply. From everything
Exactly.
from non-standard tuning to how loud I am. Just match me.
You got it. Yeah, exactly.
I've been guilty of that myself. Going into like going to play with a choir or something, and be like, well, sorry, just sing louder and come. Don't quite sing B flat.
Yeah, yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and I think early on for me, that was one of the draws to like being able to be, have some ability in different types of pipes, so that you had things to suit different occasions. I think that really appealed to me, because I'm not, at least I don't think that I'm kind of like a walk into the room and say, hey, look at me, everybody kind of person. Like I like to blend in. And I kind of feel that way about the pipes too. I mean, that I realize how crazy that sounds to say, I play the bagpipes, but I just want to blend in.
Right.
But having different pipes, gives different options. And like I was saying earlier, I kind of feel like each one of those pipes is sort of suited to more stuff. One of the things, to just go back to that tune book that I've been working on forever, one of the things that I found really hard about that is, and I was kind of writing this as part of the preface, is I play these different instruments and I play music from different styles on these different instruments. But when you start committing things to paper, it's like, who's your audience? Who are you writing for? Yeah. And I realized like I wasn't writing for just one audience, and some of these tunes fit better on one instrument than another, and the way I would ornament it for one instrument is different than how I would ornament it for another. And some of the tunes in the book, I really don't think I would like the way they sounded on the Highland pipes, but I love the way they sound on the small pipes. And ultimately I realized like all I can do is sort of put a version of it out into the world and let people make their own decisions. I can't micromanage what instruments people play music on. I can just expose them to music that I like to play.
Yeah. If Krishna were driving your chariot, then they would turn to you and say, look, you have a right to the tune book you put into the world, but you don't have a right to how people play your music.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's, I realized I kind of like was hemming and hawing over this kind of stuff forever, and then I realized like, well, I don't even necessarily want people to play it exactly like I've written it here. I want them to put their own spin on it. I'm just offering suggestions here. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. That is interesting. And whenever you do come up with that tune book, I'm going to make sure to announce it on the social media platforms where this show is, and I'll certainly be after a copy myself. Thank you. I don't want to let you go yet unless you have to. Do you have to?
No.
Okay,
I'm fine. I'm okay. Thanks.
I didn't want it to seem like I was bringing it to a close. I'm just saying, like, we're not going to forget about that tune book, dagnabbit.
Oh,
so.
Okay. Thank you.
I know you're getting busy with like some. You've got. I never know how to pronounce it. I have a T-shirt that says the name of the Vermont Pipers Gathering on it. I have two T-shirts, but I still don't know how to say it.
Càirdeas.
Càirdeas. All right, then.
Yeah,
You're going to be
Càirdeas,
teaching
yep.
at Càirdeas here shortly. I saw that
Yeah,
announcement come out.
end of July. Yep. I'm going to be, I think it's the last week in July. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but I think, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I've never been before, but I'm going to be there. They've got myself and Tim Cummings and Gary West from Scotland are going to be teaching there. So, and it's like a Monday to Friday camp. So you're there for the week and sharing tunes and that. I'm really looking forward to that. I was supposed to go last year, but things weren't opened up enough. I believe they might have had an event, but I was in Canada at that point.
They did an online thing, and that was part of the silver
okay.
lining of COVID for me. I've never been able to go to Vermont for it. I've just watched from afar, but I was able to join in for the online thing that time. It was fun.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I wasn't able to go because the border was still closed down. Yeah.
What is Vermont but southern Canada anyway?
I know, right? Yeah,
southern Nova Scotia. So.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. It was a really strange time actually, because I'm a U.S. citizen, but I could have gone to the U.S., but I was here on a visitor status at the time, and we came up here because Ellie was pregnant. We were expecting a baby, which also connects to why the tune book isn't done yet. So anyway, it was just a wacky time. So I didn't get down to it last year, but I'm really, really, really glad that I'll be able to go this year. So I'm doing that at the end of July, and then I'll also be teaching at the Pipers Gathering in Connecticut in August. So yep.
Awesome. So you're busy with a lot of stuff, and so whenever the tune book does come, I'll be keeping an eye out for it.
Yeah, thank you. I had this goal that it would be done by the time I went to these schools to teach. I don't know if that's going to be a reality or not.
Of course, it would be great to have it available when you're there.
It would be really handy. Yeah, it would be really handy. But to be honest, like the musical side of it is completely done. It's more that's the side I know how to work through the problems with, but it's the layout and the printing and all that stuff. Yeah. So that's.
I don't doubt you have it under control, Michael. So I'm not saying you should or anything, but I know that Tim Cummings, man, he has put out some beautiful books, and he has his own little publishing group. That's how he does it.
He has indeed. In fact, very early on, I think last summer when I was just starting to think about the actual putting it all together phase, I wrote to him. Tim's a wonderful guy, and I just asked him a couple of questions about, how the heck do I get started going about this? But yeah, he's a great source of information and a great source of music.
Yeah. Now, I want to drag you into another track if that's okay.
Yeah, great.
Track 10, The Braze. This one, man, no offense to Sir Aaron Shaw of the Wicked Tinkers, one of my earliest and most beloved influences in bagpiping, still one of my favorite pipers in the world.
Cool.
They did. He played. What's the track? It's the one. It's the one that I couldn't pronounce. Sir. Somebody's Fancy. Doctor. No. Sir.
Oh, Dr. McKinnis Fancy.
Yeah, Dr. McKinnis Fancy. That's right.
Yep.
They did that on their Hammered album.
Okay.
So I was familiar with it from that. So no offense to Aaron Shaw, he plays it beautifully. But hearing you play it, man, those burls early on, those runs later on in the set as well, getting away from the tune. The finger work, Michael. Again, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable from praise here, but the cleanliness of the fingers throughout this album, but like it feels like it really shines on this track. Maybe because it's maybe the real pipes help it to really like kind of pop, But
thank you.
This is some clean finger work. I'm gonna play some of that right here. as we come out of it, I'm curious. Like, well, one thing I'm curious about is, do you find that the border pipes chanter, maybe because of finger spacing, is it conducive to quick, clean finger work?
In many ways it is. I've played a number of border pipe chanters over the years, and they all seem to sort of help with some of that cleanliness, at least in my fingers. I find,
Sure,
but there is something.
And stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But there is something particularly wonderful about this chanter for me, from Finn Moore. It really, even though border pipes themselves can be kind of cantankerous and the tuning of them and that, it's a real joy to play, because I feel like I have to work hardly at all to get really nice clean sounds to come out. It really it's a joy to play. You're absolutely right.
Well, and that's not to say it's the equipment, not the player. Like you got nice clean fingers and fast moving fingers throughout the album, of course. But man, it sure seemed to especially pop in this set here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's a fun set to play. That set was for a long time was the closer to many of our concerts too.
That totally makes sense. That's a strong finish.
And the energy of sort of a closing set was definitely kind of in my mind when we recorded it. So
yeah. Do you have and not to put you on the spot, if you don't, I can cut out the question entirely. But being an instructor, do you have any, like, you're talking to pipers right now, right? So there's some existing sort of like common vocabulary and stuff like that. Do you have any of the sort of like low hanging fruit? Here's a quick tip, a life hack, if you will, for cleaner fingers.
Oof.
Or faster fingers.
Yeah. Well, often it's interesting because those two things often go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
Like I find that your fingers aren't going to go quicker until they're playing cleaner. So like if you find yourself kind of stumbling over whatever it is, a certain passage of notes, a certain embellishment, whatever it may be. If you have these little stumbling blocks that aren't clean, it's going to impede you getting to a faster tempo, in my experience. So, gosh, in terms of getting it cleaner, then how do you do it? Well, don't be afraid to slow down, and don't be afraid. I tell a lot of my students, there's always these passages that you got to woodshed, and you have to just slow it down and go through them and get it cleaner. And it seems like that's slowing the process down, but ultimately it's speeding it up, because if you just keep saying, "Oh, I screwed that up," and let me try it again, and just blast through it, it's not going to get any better. I've done that, and you just sort of cross your fingers and hope that it happens, but you never really get it solid. So it's sort of recognizing. I think you have to just have a critical ear on your own playing all the time, and recognize those little spots where you say, "Oh, that's a little fuzzy," or "That's not. I'm stumbling on myself there. Something ain't right." And cleaning those little spots up, and then it seems to lead to, clean playing seems to permeate throughout, and so clean playing leads to clean playing, which leads to freer playing, which leads to potentially faster playing. So yeah, I think that's. Yeah, and it's really easy to get, when you're playing by yourself. It's really easy to get heavy with your own playing. So I have found when I met Ellie, before Ellie moved to Ithaca, where I met her, she'd been living in Montreal, and she was playing at sessions in Montreal where the average tempo was somewhere between blazing and out of sight. So she will tell you that I slowed her down. But she also made me get a lot faster. So playing with music that is light and getting accustomed to it. If you just hear something fast and you say, "I'm going to play fast too," you tend to get just kind of heavy. You sort of clench the chanter and say, "Here we go. I'm going to get it." It's like, the kid in the backyard who says, "I'm going to hit a home run this time." So he swings even harder and misses it completely, right? You have to sort of be free and relaxed in order to play faster.
Yeah, that can be a really frustrating sort of loop, where the harder you try, the tighter your muscles get, and the less freely stuff moves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like I say, not being afraid to like slow it down a little bit and get comfortable with it. Playing with other people can sometimes sort of free you up a little bit. There's different tricks, using metronomes to sort of, get, track your progress, just taking a little bit faster rather than trying to jump from medium to blazing speed all at once.
Yeah.
Or using the metronome to sort of highlight different parts of the music. Playing on the offbeat sometimes can free a person up, depending on the type of tune, little tricks like that. But, yeah, I think at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to really listening to yourself critically and being honest with what am I doing and, how do I improve upon it?
Yeah.
Just listening to yourself critically.
Yeah, speaking of listening to yourself critically, I don't want to dig up the pain that surely all recorded artists feel. But like you mentioned, like how teaching, helps the teacher to learn, right?
Absolutely.
And certainly like writing your tune book, makes you think about these tunes in a different way as well. Having recorded an album, is it hard for you to listen to the album?
Sometimes, yes. Yes. Yeah, it's a little different. Like, I kind of glossed over the whole part of my life that was like singing, and you were saying that you couldn't find any recordings of me singing. That's sort of intentional, because I absolutely could not listen to those. I don't really enjoy listening back to those at all. With pipes, at least, I'm able to sort of separate out. The pipes become this sort of intermediary. So I'm a little less. It's a little less difficult to listen to. There are times, when we first recorded the Meeting Place, there were certain things, you remember how it felt in the moment. You can recall the muscle memory. So, there's parts where, the A's weren't in tune there, and it was really driving me nuts. And so when I listened to it right after recording, it just was like a knife to my ears.
Yeah.
And now if I go back to it a couple of years out, I say, oh, it's not perfect, but it's,
Not
I
as
was
bad
being a
as
little,
it was in your head, right?
right,
Yeah.
So, so sometimes it can be, but I will say, I have always found it really useful to listen to myself, to learn from recordings of myself.
Yeah.
So I think from kind of an early age, I just love it. I hope it doesn't come across as like a narcissistic kind of thing, but like I love listening to pipes, and so I loved listening even to my own pipes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
Even when I was younger, but I realized like really early on that I could learn a lot. Like I was catching a lot of things listening to recordings of myself that I wasn't hearing in the moment. So I think I got kind of comfortable listening to myself early on and assessing what I was doing and learning from that. So yeah, there are times when it's can be tough to listen to. But for the most part, I try to treat it as a learning experience.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to know that, partly just because I've enjoyed this album it's been on rotation so many times for me. I'd love to think that you and Elliot and Tim are all able to enjoy it yourselves too. You ought to be proud of it. It's really excellent.
It's funny, like I think we recorded it, and then we were playing a lot of the music on it in concerts and on tours and stuff like that. So, we didn't go back and listen to the album itself for a very long time. But it was just probably in the last 6 months. Actually, I know what it was. We were in Nova Scotia actually a few weeks ago. We're actually going to be moving there. And we were driving around in my sister-in-law's car, and she very kindly had put the album in the CD player.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so, we hadn't listened to it in forever. So it was on, but we were driving around not really paying attention to it, and we kind of got quiet for a little while, and we could hear the music. And Ellie said, this is okay. This isn't bad. So I think with something like that, with an album, I don't necessarily consciously go back and listen to that stuff. I don't really go back and listen to the album myself, but at the same time, it's nice a little ways out, not right after it's recorded, but a little ways out to go back and say, yeah, I can stand by this. I'm proud of this.
That makes sense. I feel like I can hear in the echoes of my own memory, members of maybe either Pink Floyd or some of the Beatles saying something very similar about in one of those sort of like behind the album exposés, where they like do the documentary thing and interview them years later about being like, 12 years after we'd made that album, I happened to hear it on the radio and I thought to myself, that actually is not too bad.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's definitely an element though of like you record it and then you just got to let it go.
Yeah.
Like,
when will it ever be perfect enough in the moment, right?
Yeah. And too, the more I record, the more I worry about, the more I record, the less I worry about it being perfect too, So it's there's a nice sort of letting go process that you learn in that too.
Hello, friends. Just hopping in here real quick to make my standard plug. This podcast, of course, is something that I love doing, and I'll keep doing it no matter what for free, so don't worry about that. But if you want to send me money, I'm never going to say no to that. Well, I shouldn't say never. Maybe there is a situation where I would say no to money, but in most situations, I think that the chances that would be in a situation where I would say no to money are slim enough that at least in general we can say that if you want to send me money, I'm not going to stop you. Easiest way to do that is through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/droningonpodcast. Of course, I can work out other things too, so let me know if you don't like Patreon. But we do regular drawings for bagpipe-related albums, books, sheet music, droning on swag, all that kind of stuff. And this month, in fact, the drawing is going to be one of Arise and Go's albums, probably the one we're talking about here, the Meeting Place. So those drawings are just pulled from a figurative hat of supporters. So get your name in that hat and get some cool stuff. Another good way to support the show and me is to buy stuff from my little online shop, bagpipeswag.com. It's just a place where myself and some friends put cool bagpipey stuff. We got merch there for various bagpipe artists as well, and bagpipe bands and stuff like that. It's a cool website. Go check it out. There are notes, or there's a link in the show notes. And if you feel so inclined, I also invite you to follow the show on Facebook or Instagram. Trying to get stuff up on YouTube right now as well. But Facebook especially is a place where it's a little easier for me to put out questions to listeners. If I've got upcoming interviews and want ideas, if I'm going to interview somebody that you might know about, and just be able to be like, hey, I'm going to interview this person. Are there any things you want to ask them? It's a fun thing. And I'm still hopeful that at some point we'll do some kind of virtual book club. I think that could be a lot of fun. Maybe some bagpipe related books. I think would be the genre we'd be looking at. Anyway, you can always email the podcast at thedroningonpodcast@gmail.com. There are a bunch of links to all this stuff in the show notes. Also, there are links to all the stuff that Michael and I have been talking about in this interview. I'd highly recommend checking out their YouTube channel. Of course, hop over to Bandcamp or onto their website and get a copy of their album if you haven't yet. It's an excellent album. There's not a single track on there that you won't enjoy, I'm quite sure. The samples that we have in here are by no means the whole thing. And it's real good. So hop on over there and support that band and get some of their awesome music. And back to the interview. Thanks very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Now, would I be digging in too much to ask you about the name of the group? Where did Arise and Go come from?
Oh yeah. So we started to play together, and kind of had this chemistry right away, and really loved playing together. It took a while to kind of find our group sound, but we loved playing together right off the bat. So forming the band part of it was easy. But the hardest part was coming up with a name. Name, it sounds so dumb, but everything was either we were trying to sound too serious or it was too cheesy or whatever. And actually it was my sister, Laura, who suggested this band name. And we pulled it from the opening line of Yeats's Lake Isle of Innisfree. The poem, The Lake Isle of Innisfree.
I don't know it, but I'm gonna Google it right now.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poem. You should look it up. The opening line is, I will arise and go now and go to Innisfree. And we actually, at a lot of our live shows, we will do this where Ellie and Tim do this beautiful air, and I sort of, to give a background about the band, I recite the poem over the top of the air. And we don't, we do it at some of our more intimate, smaller shows, not the big stage shows and that. But yeah, that's where it came from, at the suggestion of my sister, and for whatever reason, it clicked. The poem is full of this really beautiful imagery, and for whatever reason, it seemed to work for us.
Yeah. What about the logo or typeface? Was there a lot of thought behind that, or was it just pretty, so you stuck with it?
That is also my sister's doing. My sister Laura, she has done all of our sort of artwork needs throughout the existence of the band. So we have an EP that we recorded first back in, I forget what year, like a 4-track EP.
Yeah.
And the front of that has a big sort of watercolor logo of Arise and Go, and she did that. And then when we were going to do the album, we knew there was going to be photographs on the album. But, we sort of needed a logo. We needed our name. And she did that as well. So she's really does beautiful artwork, a lot of, beautiful Celtic knotwork, other stuff too. Yeah. Beautiful watercolors. But anyway, we tasked her with coming up with a logo for us. And she came up with a couple versions that she liked. And we loved them all. And we ended up just settling on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was all original artwork from her.
Well, I tip my hat to her. I maybe get a little too excited about that kind of thing, but I think it's lovely, and I feel like it's evocative of the name itself. I mean, the Go feels like it's pointing me on my way, and the Arise has that kind of like flowy thing, so it's like the whole thing is moving itself,
It's like you were there in the room with us when we were talking about this. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think those were some of the exact things that we sort of said and talked about as we were kind of brainstorming what it should look like and what she came up with. So yeah, that's great. I'm glad it reads that way.
Well, and I will have links to all this stuff down below, but just for anybody who's been listening, when you're looking for the group, I will note that typing out Arise ANDGO takes a little bit longer. If you put Arise &Go, you'll find them faster. That seems to bring up results more quickly.
For whatever reason, like when we came up with that name, like we were just so firm that the ampersand was so much cooler. We wanted that, but it does lead to difficulty in finding us sometimes.
Just a little bit. I mean, you can find it either way. I just found that it was a more direct route to use the ampersand to find them directly.
Excellent.
Now, I think maybe if it works for you, we'll go out on track 5.
Okay.
But before we did that, I did want to also ask you, I noticed while sort of digging around the internet that you played a solo with the Chieftains.
Oh, yeah.
What was that like? I mean, I saw you standing next to a legend,
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was, I know this is going to sound like really cheesy and like what, just kind of trite, but it was one of the greatest nights of my life. It was great. Because
Michael, you and I are part of the same tribe in this, and so are all the listeners. So none of us thinks that's cheesy. We are all surely tearing up right now, just imagining the experience.
Yeah, it was, so I grew up. My sister Laura, who I was saying did the artwork for Rise and Go. She's a little bit older than I am, and she was really into Irish music long before I was, and so I was exposed to so much good music because of her. And she, even though she is not a musician herself, I owe a lot of my musical life to her and her influence. And anyway, as part of that, the Chieftains were just this massive part of my soundtrack of my growing up and my whole life. So anyway, they had this really special place in my heart, and then as I learned to play the uilleann pipes and got more and more into Irish music, it was like I had this another complete rediscovering of them, and just on a whole new level, and they just incredible importance to me. So it was when I was in graduate school, so it was probably around 2013, somewhere in there. The Chieftains were doing their 50th anniversary tour, and the tour was one of the stops on the tour was gonna be in Utica, in my hometown. And at that time, everywhere they went, they were inviting a local pipe band to play a set or two with them, because they had a couple sets that they had recorded with Highland pipes. So they would call on the local pipe band to sort of do that. So our band got contacted to do that. I remember sitting in the graduate student lounge in graduate school, and I got the email from my friend Jim, who runs the Frasers, saying that they'd gotten this call, is anybody interested? And you can attest, James, that I'm not the fastest at responding to emails, but I responded to that email with blazing speed.
I'm sure.
Count me in. So anyway, we put a group together. The concert happened, I went home to Utica to be a part of this group from the Frasers who did it. And Jim was kind enough at that time, he was in charge, he was the boss man, but he said, why don't you run things today?
Wow.
He said, it'd be great for you. You'll get a chance to talk to Patty Maloney. And he was really kind of him. And he sort of handed the reins over to me for the day. So we go for the rehearsal in the afternoon just to run through things. And it all goes great, and got to sort of deal with Patty Maloney.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, the rehearsal was done, and thanks everybody. We'll see you back at whatever time. And before he ran off, I went over to him, and I just over to Patty Maloney, and I just thanked him for all the great music and the huge influence he'd been. And he was very, very humble about it and sort of self-deprecating. And as every uilleann piper says, when you sort of compliment them in their piping, he says, the pipes don't really like being on tour, and they're not playing that great, and blah 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 blah.
Course, yeah.
But he was just so kind about it, and it was just so really magical to get to meet him. And then as I'm about to walk away and say thank you, he said, would you like to play a little solo bit in the concert tonight? And I almost needed a change of pants.
Yeah.
And to be honest, at that time, I was in graduate school. I really was not playing the pipes with any regularity.
At peak performance, really.
Yeah, I hadn't probably touched them in longer than I'd care to admit. So I was not only nervous for the opportunity, but like, what am I gonna do? Yeah. But I said yes, and then went off.
Break in a reed.
Yeah, right. Kind of spent the next little while thinking, what can I play that would sort of be up to snuff, but that I know that I won't fall to pieces over.
Right. Yeah.
And just picked a couple of reels that fit in well, but it was incredibly nerve-wracking, but just the whole thing, not even just getting to play the solo, just like standing in the wings and getting to watch them play, and just these people who had held such a high place in my whole life, getting to watch them from such a close distance and listening to them. It was absolutely incredible, and I'll be forever thankful for it.
No, it sounds amazing. That's really cool.
Yep.
Now, track 5 seems to me like a lovely thing to kind of like fade out on. It's just like a really pretty it's like a fiddle feature, right? You got some whistle in there and stuff too. This is They Took My Wife From Me last night.
Yep.
It's an evocative title. If there's not anything to say about it, no sweat. We can glide out. But is there any story behind this tune?
The tune itself we found it anyway, in the Patrick McDonald collection, which is an old collection of tunes from the Highlands.
My buddy Jeremy mentions that collection now and again on his Bagpipes and History podcast.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So we had found it in there, and it's marked as a strathspey in that, so you can imagine that immediately gives you an idea of a certain tempo and style. But I think Ellie was the one actually who found that and said, I think this would work really well as a slow tune. And so that's kind of how we approached it. In terms of the title, I don't know too much about it, any story or history of it. I will say, though, there's Angus Grant is a kind of a legendary Scottish fiddler, and he has a collection of tunes, traditional tunes in that, his settings of them. And he has it in that book as well. And he very much takes it as, since it's a strathspey, it's meant to be played kind of up-tempo. And he takes the approach that they took my wife from me last night, and so there was a party afterwards, because it was, it was kind of up-tempo and kind of a lively tune. Yeah. Whereas we took the complete opposite approach to it, as, that it was not a good thing, that he was not happy to see her go. But interesting, though, to think about how a tune can be interpreted so completely opposite. And be played in different ways, but yeah.
Well, it works. It's lovely. I like the way you did it. I'll have to look up the party version and see how it.
Yeah, exactly.